What is a mind? This is one of the questions that we'll be addressing in some detail through the course of the course. And it's a controversial question. There are many different dimensions to it. The way I would like to start out is by discussing two very influential views about what the fundamental nature of minds is. And so these are both accounts of what could be called the ontology of minds. That is, what kind of existence do they have? And basically, just like what are they in the sense of what kind of thing or what kind of substance makes them up. These two extremely influential views are called dualism and identity theory. Now, dualism is the older of these views. It goes back at least 500, 400 years, maybe more than that. And identity theory is a more recent and probably in current times more popular view. I want to start with the identity theory because it's probably closer to the way that most students in the class currently think about minds. So what I want to do is in these lectures, I'll kind of review the identity theory and talk about some potential problems with it. The identity theory, simply put, is that minds are identical to brains. So you ask what the mind is or what a mind is, the answer is a mind is a brain. Now, what is a brain is relatively easy to understand. We have these things in our heads. They're organs. They can be studied, biologically. They can be studied in labs. Of course, all the details of how brains work is very complicated and certainly not fully understood. But what a brain is, we understand pretty well. And there are maybe some questions about sort of where the brain begins and ends, like does the spinal cord count as part of the brain? Does the brainstem count as part of the brain? Those kinds of questions. But for the most part, it's relatively easy to say what a brain is. What about the word mind? What do we mean by that? When we are trying to equate these two things and say that minds are identical to brains, then we must mean something by the word mind, particularly since it's a question for us what minds are, and this is supposed to be an answer to that question. We should be able to say what the content of that concept of a mind is that we're now saying is the same thing as a brain. And so here are some things that at least traditionally people have thought go along with being a mind. Okay, so these are things that minds do. Maybe not every mind does all of these things, but in order for something to be a mind, it has to do some, subset of these things. So thinking, reasoning, believing, deciding, understanding, having memory, being intelligent, not indicating like it has to be really intelligent, but at least intelligent to some degree, is conscious, has emotions. So, I think that everyone in the class, these descriptors all apply to them. And so we don't have any problem saying that, those of us who are part of this discussion, all of us have minds. The tricky places come up when we're trying to kind of extend that concept of mind to things like non-human animals or robots and AI and things like that. We have the question then, well, do those things really believe? Do they really understand? To what extent do they have memory, etc.? To what extent are they conscious, etc.? Okay, and so those questions. I'm just kind of talking a little bit about how it is we use the word mind and why and how we decide what kinds of things we describe as having minds or as being minds. And so, I have a quote here from Descartes, which is kind of like his definition of mind, and it's very similar to the definition that I have on the slide here. So another way to put the identity theory then, if we adopt this definition of mind, is that the identity theory says that things that do all of these things, like whatever thinks, reasons, believes, decides, understands, has memory, etc., is a brain. And brains are the things that do all of these things. One other small point here before moving on. Sometimes it's useful to talk about minds in a little bit more refined way in terms of the things that are part of them, which we can call mental substances, the states that they can be in, which we can call mental states. So, like moods are mental states. To be depressed, or beliefs are mental states. To have a certain belief or a certain desire, that's to be in a certain mental state. For a mind to be in a certain mental state, or for a person to be in a certain mental state. And those mental state descriptors are supposed to be describing something about minds or ways that minds can be. And then likewise, minds can have properties, in other words, attributes or features. Um, Interestingly, properties kind of can be expressed usually with adjectives, and substances can usually be expressed or articulated with nouns. So there's a bit of a grammatical analogy there. Um, but yeah, we'll sometimes want to talk about minds in terms of mental states or mental properties, or occasionally in terms of mental substances.